My brother called it just a setback. That's what he said when he showed up at my parents' front door with 2 duffel bags and the look of a man who had already decided someone else would handle the rest. That someone else, it turned out, was me. Let me back up. I'm Maya. I'm 32 years old and I run a freelance UX design practice out of my home studio. I've been doing it for 4 years. Before that, I spent 3 years at an agency downtown, learning the industry, building a client list, quietly saving every dollar I could, so that one day I wouldn't have to answer to anyone at 9 in the morning. I achieved that. I built that. Not inherited, not gifted. Built. When I was 28, I moved back into my parents' house in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. Not because I had to. Because I ran the numbers and it made sense. The plan was simple. Live rent-free for 2 years. Stack the savings, invest in my studio setup, then buy my own place outright and never have a landlord again. Smart, right? Practical. The kind of decision a financial advisor would applaud. Except 2 years became 4. Not because I failed at the plan, because somewhere along the way I became infrastructure. The basement had been storage when I moved back. Boxes of Christmas decorations, my dad's old golf equipment, a broken treadmill nobody had used since 2009. I asked if I could clear it out and convert it into a workspace. My parents said yes, go ahead. So I did. I hired a contractor. I had the floors redone, the walls properly insulated and drywalled. I put in recessed lighting, a dedicated electrical circuit for my monitors and equipment, a small HVAC split unit so I could control the temperature without fighting about the thermostat upstairs. I built a custom desk along one wall. I soundproofed the ceiling with acoustic panels because I do video calls with clients in San Francisco and New York and I needed it quiet. All in, I spent a little over $26,000. My money, my savings, my Saturday mornings supervising tile installation instead of sleeping in. My parents watched the whole thing happen and said it looked nice. In exchange for living there, I covered the utilities, the electric bill, which ran high because my dad ran the heat like he was trying to grow tropical plants. The internet, upgraded to a gigabit fiber plan because the old connection couldn't handle my upload-heavy workflow. I also quietly picked up the bill for the pest control service after my mom mentioned they'd had a problem, and I hired a lawn service after my dad's back made it too hard for him to mow regularly. I didn't announce any of this. I just did it. The way you do things when you love your family and you have the means, and it's just easier than watching problems sit there unsolved. For 4 years, that was my life. Work downstairs, eat dinner upstairs, contribute silently, mind my own business. Then my brother came home. His name is Derek. He's 36 and he'd been living in Phoenix with his wife Kendra for the better part of 7 years. I won't drag Kendra. Their marriage ended for reasons that are theirs alone, and none of it is my business. What is my business is the way Derek arrived. No call ahead. Just a Sunday afternoon, the doorbell rings, and there he is. Bags on the porch. Eyes red. My mom made a sound I hadn't heard since our grandmother died. I came upstairs from the studio to find my parents sitting on either side of him at the kitchen table like he was a wounded bird they'd found on the sidewalk. He was telling them the condensed version, the separation, the apartment in Phoenix he'd had to vacate, the job situation that was transitioning. I stood in the doorway for a second, read the room, said hey, and went back downstairs. I'm not cold-hearted. I knew he was hurting, but I also knew my family, and I knew that the minute Derek walked through that door, the gravitational center of the house had shifted. The first 2 weeks were fine, or fine adjacent. He slept in his old room. He spent most of his time on the couch watching basketball and talking on the phone. My parents were in full emergency caretaking mode, which meant my mom cooked more, my dad talked less, and the whole house felt like a waiting room. I kept my head down, worked my projects, sent my invoices. It was a Wednesday evening when my mom knocked on the studio door. I took my headphones off and told her to come in. She looked around the space the way she always did, slightly awed by it, like she'd forgotten in the weeks since she'd last been down here that it was this nice. She sat on the edge of the small couch I kept near the window. She had her hands folded in her lap, which was never a good sign. "Your brother's really struggling," she said. "I know," I said. "I'm sorry he's going through it." She nodded slowly. "He needs stability, something to anchor him. A fresh start." She paused. "He's been talking about consulting, doing some remote work, maybe starting something of his own eventually." "That's good," I said, because it was. Derek was smart when he applied himself. He had a background in project management. Remote consulting was a realistic path. He'd need a proper space for that, my mom said. Somewhere he can take calls, have it feel professional. I looked at her. She was looking at the acoustic panels on the ceiling. "Mom," I said, "just hear me out." "Mom, it's already set up perfectly. The desk, the lighting, the soundproofing. He wouldn't need to change anything. And you're so adaptable. You could work from the dining room, or we could set up something in the guest room upstairs. It's temporary, just until he gets back on his feet." I didn't say anything for a moment. I was doing the thing I always do, which is run through every possible response before I open my mouth, because I've learned that how you say something in my family determines whether it gets heard or weaponized. "This is my office," I said. "I built it. I paid for it. My business runs out of this space." "I know, sweetheart. I have clients. I have calls scheduled weeks in advance. I have equipment in here that I can't just relocate to the dining room. Other people work from kitchen tables. Other people didn't invest $26,000 in an insulated, dedicated studio so they could sit at a kitchen table." She looked hurt. Not guilty, not caught, hurt. Like I was the one doing something wrong. "He's your brother," she said. "He has nothing right now. He has a room upstairs. He has 2 parents who love him and a roof over his head and time to figure out his next move. What he doesn't have is a claim on a space I built." She left without saying much else. I put my headphones back on and sat there for a while, not working, just sitting. I should have known that wasn't the end of it. The formal conversation happened that Friday at dinner. My dad was the one who opened it this time, which meant they had coordinated, which meant it had already been decided. "Derek needs a workspace," my dad said, as though this was simply a fact, like the weather. "He can use the desk in his room," I said. "His room doesn't have the setup yours does. My room has the setup mine does because I spent 4 years and $26,000 making it that way. Money you saved while living here," my dad said. He said it carefully, like he'd rehearsed it. I put my fork down. "Is that the argument? That because I lived here, I owe you my studio?" "Nobody's saying you owe anyone anything," Derek said from across the table. He had his reasonable voice on, the one he used when he wanted to seem like the neutral party. "I'm just in a tough spot. The space downstairs would genuinely help me rebuild. It doesn't have to be forever." "It's never forever," I said. "It's always temporary. And then temporary becomes permanent because nobody actually solves the problem. They just borrow from whoever will let them." "That's not fair," my mom said. "I'm not being unfair. I'm being accurate." My dad's jaw tightened. "Family helps family. That's how we raised you. You raised me to work hard and be self-sufficient," I said. "That's what I'm doing. I built something. I'd like to keep it." The table went quiet. Derek was staring at his plate. My mom was blinking a lot, which is what she does when she's deciding whether to cry. Then my dad said, "We're not asking, Maya. We're telling you. Derek is going to use the studio while he gets himself sorted. You're resourceful. You'll figure something out." I looked at my father. He was serving himself more mashed potatoes, and he had the expression of a man who considered the matter closed. "Okay," I said. Everyone relaxed slightly. My mom smiled a little. Derek looked up. "I appreciate it," he said. "Sure," I said. I finished my dinner. I complimented my mom on the chicken, which genuinely was good. I rinsed my plate, said I had an early call, and went downstairs. I wasn't agreeing to anything. I was starting a clock. The next morning, I called a commercial real estate broker I knew through a client. explained what I was looking for. She sent me 3 listings that afternoon. I toured one on Tuesday. A small suite in a co-working building about 8 minutes from the house, ground floor, private office with a lockable door, great light, reliable building-wide fiber. The monthly rate was steep but manageable. I signed a lease that afternoon. 6 months, renewable. Over the next 10 days, I moved methodically. I didn't announce it. I told my family I was clearing out the studio to make room for Derek, which was technically true. I hired movers for the heavy equipment. I transferred my files. I updated my mailing address with clients. I notified my accountant. Then I handled the administrative layer, which was the part that mattered. I logged into the utility accounts, the electric bill, transferred to my dad's name, email, and autopay, updated to his info, confirmation sent to his address, the gigabit fiber plan downgraded to the standard residential tier, my business account closed. The autopay I'd set up for the lawn service, cancelled. The pest control subscription, cancelled. The Hulu and Netflix accounts I'd been paying and sharing with the whole house, password changed, then cancelled. I wasn't cruel about it. I didn't call them and announce what I was doing. I simply removed my name, my payment methods, and my accounts from a house that was no longer going to be my primary workspace. The last thing I did before I handed over the studio was leave it cleaner than it had ever been. I wiped down every surface. I took the last of my personal items, a small plant, a framed print I liked, the good desk lamp. I left everything else that had been installed, the acoustic panels, the lighting fixtures, the split unit. Those were now part of the house, my gift to the renovation. I left a key on the kitchen counter with a sticky note that said, "Studio's all yours. Good luck with the consulting." I didn't say I was leaving the house entirely. They hadn't asked, and I hadn't offered. I simply stopped sleeping in the guest room and I waited to see how long it took them to notice. The answer was 11 days. My mom texted, "Hey, have you been staying at a friend's? Your car's never here in the mornings. I got an apartment downtown, moved in last week. Should have mentioned it. Sorry, it happened fast." Her, "What? When? Why didn't you tell us?" Me, "It felt like the right time to get my own place. I've been planning it for a while." She called. I let it ring. She called again. I let it ring. She called again. I let it ring. Then I texted, "I'm in a client call, I'll reach out soon." I wasn't in a client call. The second wave came from my dad 5 days later. A voicemail. His voice had a tone I recognized, the one that was working very hard to sound reasonable while actually being furious. "Maya, the electric bill this month was almost $300. I think there's something wrong with the account. Can you take a look at it? Also, the internet is barely working. Derek says it keeps dropping on his calls. Call me back." I texted, "The account is in your name now. I transferred it before I moved out. The internet should be on the standard plan, which is about 100 megabits. If Derek needs more bandwidth for work calls, you can upgrade through the provider's website. They have a few tiers." My dad, "Why would you do that without telling us?" Me, "I moved out. The utilities are the homeowner's responsibility. I should have communicated the transition better. I'm sorry about that. But you want to set up autopay so nothing lapses." He didn't respond. What I know about the next 6 weeks, I know mostly through my cousin Bree, who lived nearby and occasionally stopped by my parents' place for Sunday dinners. She gave me updates the way you describe a slow-moving weather system. Derek had moved into the studio but wasn't using it the way anyone had imagined. Turns out the standard internet plan didn't have the upload speed he needed for video calls with potential clients. He'd been doing calls from his phone in the backyard, which didn't project the professional image he was going for. He'd also discovered that the split unit ran up the electric bill significantly, so they'd been turning it off to save money, which made the studio cold in the mornings and stuffy by afternoon. He was spending most of his actual working hours at the public library 2 miles away, which had better Wi-Fi. My mom had called the lawn service to restart them and learned the account had been cancelled and a new contract would require a deposit. She hadn't moved forward with it. The lawn, Bree reported, was starting to look rough. I absorbed all of this information the way you absorb news from a country you used to live in. with interest, some sadness, and a clear sense that it is no longer your emergency. The actual crisis came on a Saturday in February. My phone rang at 8 in the morning. My mom. I silenced it. Then Derek. Then my dad. Then my mom again. I sat up in bed in my apartment, in the quiet, and looked at the 4 missed calls on my screen. My apartment was warm. The floors were heated, a luxury I'd specifically sought out when I signed the lease. Because I'm a person who gets cold easily, and I finally lived somewhere where I didn't have to negotiate the thermostat with anyone. My coffee maker had already started on its timer. The city outside my window was grey and still. I called Derek back because I figured he'd give me the most straightforward account of what was happening. "The heat's out in the main house," he said. "The furnace stopped working last night. It's 40 degrees in here." "Did you call an HVAC company?" "Dad called one. They can come Monday. Earliest available." "Okay. So you need to get through the weekend." "It's February, Maya. I know what month it is." I paused. "Is everyone safe? Do you need somewhere to sleep tonight?" A beat of silence. "We're okay. Mom has space heaters. But listen, the furnace guy said it's probably going to be a significant repair. Like possibly a full replacement. Dad's asking if you can help cover it." There it was. How much? He doesn't know yet, but he said probably between 4 and 8,000. I got up and walked to the kitchen, poured my coffee, stood at the window looking out at the street below. "Derek," I said, "I don't own that house. I know. I'm not on the mortgage. I'm not a tenant. I don't have any legal interest in the property. I know that too. A furnace replacement is a homeowner expense. That's what homeowners insurance is for. Or a home equity line if they need financing. Dad doesn't really know how to access the equity line. Mom said you used to handle all that. The login information is in the green folder in the filing cabinet in the home office, the one I left behind. I set up all the accounts with their email addresses. They just need to do the password reset." Silence. "You're really not going to help," Derek said. It wasn't quite an accusation, more like he was saying it out loud to confirm it was real. "I'm giving you actionable information that will solve the problem," I said. "That's help. You know what I mean, Derek." I put my mug down. I spent 4 years paying for a house I didn't own. And the moment I built something of my own in it, Dad sat at a dinner table and told me he wasn't asking, he was telling me to give it up. And everyone let that happen, including you. He didn't say anything. "I still love you," I said. "I still love Mom and Dad. But I'm not the solution to every problem that comes up over there anymore. I can't be." "Yeah," he said finally. Quietly. "Okay." We hung up. My parents called twice more that day. I didn't pick up. I texted my mom I heard about the furnace. The home equity line information is in the green folder, filing cabinet in the studio. You can call the bank directly if you need help navigating it. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this." She didn't respond that day. That was fine. 3 weeks later, my dad texted me, "Can we meet up somewhere?" Just to talk. I suggested the cafe near my office, neutral ground, a place I liked. He showed up on time, which was unusual. He looked tired in a way that had less to do with the cold weekend and more to do with the accumulation of recent weeks. He ordered a black coffee. I ordered a latte. We sat by the window. "I owe you an apology," he said. I hadn't expected that to be the first sentence. I let it land for a second. For what specifically, I asked, not sarcastically. I genuinely wanted to know which part he was referring to. For how I handled the studio situation. He wrapped his hands around his mug. I didn't think it through. Derek was struggling and it felt like the obvious solution, and I didn't consider that it wasn't my solution to offer. "It cost me $26,000, I said, "and 4 years of what I'd built." "I know." He looked out the window. "We figured out the equity line, by the way, for the furnace. Your mother called the bank and they walked her through it." "Good." She was pretty proud of herself. I smiled a little at that. I knew my mother. That kind of thing would matter to her. Dead ex applying for jobs, my dad said. A real ones. He had 2 interviews this week. I'm glad. He's using the library. He says the Wi-Fi is actually pretty good. It is. I used to go there when I needed a change of scenery. My dad nodded. He looked like he was working up to something. I waited. I spent a lot of years not really seeing what you were doing for us, he said. I know you paid some things. I didn't realize how much. Not until it stopped. I know you didn't. That wasn't fair to you. No, I said. It wasn't. We were quiet for a moment. The cafe was warm. Someone at the counter was ordering something complicated. Outside, the street was bright with February sun, the kind of cold, bright light that looks warmer than it is. I'm not coming back to live there, I said. I want to be clear about that. This apartment is mine. My office is mine. I'm not going back to the way things were. I'm not asking you to, he said. I wanted you to know that I understand why you left the way you did, and I'm sorry I made it necessary. I looked at my father. He was 63 years old, and he looked every year of it in that moment. Not in a bad way. Just real. Just human. Thank you for saying that, I said. We talked for another hour. Not about the house or the money or any of it. About other things. His old project management stories. A road trip my parents were thinking about taking in this spring. How I was liking the new neighborhood. Normal conversation. The kind we hadn't had in a long time. Maybe because we'd always been too occupied with the other kind. When we got up to leave, he hugged me in the doorway of the cafe. It was a real hug, the kind he used to give when I was small. I'm proud of you, he said. I don't say that enough. You don't, I said, but I appreciate it. I walked back to my office in the winter sun. It was cold, but not in an unpleasant way. There's a difference between the cold that comes from standing in a draft your dad won't fix and the cold that just exists outside, the kind you can button up against and walk through. My inbox had 2 new messages from clients, a project proposal I needed to finish by Thursday, a potential new contract from a startup in Austin that had found me through a referral. I sat down at my desk in my office in a building where nobody could reassign my space, and I opened my laptop. 4 months earlier, I had a studio I'd built with my own hands and my own savings, and a family who had decided my comfort was a communal resource. Now I had all of that, plus a door with my name on it, and a dad who had looked me in the eye at a cafe table and told me he was proud. I hadn't burned anything down. I hadn't screamed or cried or made anyone the villain in a story I posted online. I had simply stopped subsidizing a situation that had stopped being sustainable, and I had trusted that the people I loved were capable of standing up without me under them. Most of the time, that's all you can do. Stop holding the weight. Step back, see what holds. My family held. Imperfectly, slowly, with some frustration and a cold February weekend they'll probably talk about for years. But they held, and so did I. There's a version of the story where I stayed, where I carried the electric bill and the internet plan and the lawn service for another year, maybe 2, maybe indefinitely, because that's what I'd always done and because nobody had ever told me I was allowed to stop. I know that version well. I lived adjacent to it for 4 years. What I've come to understand, sitting on the other side of it now, is that the way things ended wasn't an accident. Not in a mystical sense, not fate or the universe balancing a scale. I mean it practically. The outcome was a direct result of choices, mine and theirs, stacked on top of each other over a long period of time. My parents made a habit of taking without noticing. I made a habit of giving without accounting for the cost. Those 2 patterns fit together perfectly, and they would have kept fitting together indefinitely if I hadn't decided to change the shape of mine. That's the part nobody tells you about setting boundaries with family. It's not a dramatic moment. It's not one conversation that fixes everything. It's a quiet internal decision made alone, usually at an unremarkable hour, that you are going to stop participating in a dynamic that is hurting you. And then you follow through on it, one small action at a time. I didn't cut my parents off. I didn't write them a letter detailing every grievance. I transferred a utility account. I cancelled a subscription. I signed a lease. Those aren't grand gestures, they're just logistics. But logistics, done consistently and without apology, communicate something that words rarely can: that you are serious, that you have moved, and that you are not coming back to the old arrangement. What happened to Derek and my parents in those weeks after I left wasn't punishment. I want to be clear about that because I've thought about it a lot. A cold February weekend and an overdue electric bill are not suffering I inflicted on them. They are the natural consequences of a household that had been operating on someone else's infrastructure, discovering what it actually cost to function. My dad learned to log into the mortgage portal. My mom called the bank herself and figured out the equity line. Derek started going to interviews. None of that would have happened on the timeline it did if I had stayed and kept absorbing the fiction for them. Strength, real strength, isn't about endurance. It's not about how long you can hold something up. It's about knowing when holding it up is the very thing preventing the people you love from learning to hold it themselves. I spent years mistaking my own exhaustion for devotion. I thought being indispensable meant being loved. What it actually meant was being used, not out of malice, but out of comfort, which is its own quiet kind of taking. What I'm most proud of isn't that I left. It's that I left without burning anything down. I didn't need my family to be villains for my decision to be valid. My dad apologized over black coffee in a warm cafe and told me he was proud of me, and I believed him. And I also knew that neither of those things changed what I had built for myself or required me to dismantle it. Both things were true at once. That's usually how it goes. The studio I work in now has my name on the door. Nobody can reassign it. And the family I come from is slowly, imperfectly learning what it means to be a family of adults. That's enough. That's actually more than enough.